hello everyone, and welcome to today's event. My name is, as mentioned earlier, Suri Kempe, and I'm a feminist and activist, most recently, visibly, I guess, in the area of citizenship rights. And I'll be your moderator for today. Um, I feel like, as we saw, sports is really a rallying point for people across the world, and even at the national level, our athletes are a source of pride for a country. And nowhere is this more evident than in the recently concluded Olympics. I mean, I had to throw the Olympics in there because, we just got done. And it takes really years of dedication, as both my panelists will attest to, training and sacrifice for athletes to get to that point, that pinnacle of their performance. But that sacrifice should not include their dignity and safety, right? Be it physically, emotionally, or psychologically. And sexual harassment is, unfortunately, I think, one of those things that athletes are exposed to. And it is a reality and it's an issue I think we can all agree that has to be addressed and addressed swiftly. So we've just watched a movie about the Olympic gold medalist Sofia Bekaturu and Amalia, who was the first case of a woman in sports, a sexual harassment case of a woman in sports that got taken to court and prosecuted, right, in Greece. And with me today, I have two panelists who will help us unpack how sexual harassment plays out in Malaysia, in our own country. And our first speaker is Sarina Sundara, who was a national athlete, a gymnast, and is now the president of the CSO Safe Sports, of the NGO Safe Sports. And then on my left here is Keshika Subbarao, am I saying that right? Subbarao, a professional football coach and scout. So maybe just to kick things off and stop myself from talking, being the only one who's talking, maybe you could start with you. You could tell us a little bit about yourselves, and if you are comfortable, your experience with sexual harassment in sports yourselves. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming today. My name is Keshika, and as Suri mentioned, I'm a professional football coach. I've been coaching for about 13 years, and I've coached in 4 different countries, and the last 7 years, I've been based in Malaysia. I've coached at various academies, clubs at different levels, and unfortunately, there's been a lot of sexual harassment and child abuse cases that happen within the football community that often goes unaddressed. And I think over the last year, I've kind of distanced myself from the sport because of this. It just got a bit too much. Some of the things that we've experienced is, as a coach, I've seen young girls being abused by their coaches. And then when we report, we often get repercussion from it. So I've had colleagues that were fired for speaking out. There was once where one of the girls that I was coaching with, another coach said inappropriate sexual remarks to her. She was 12 at the time. And then when I reported and the investigation was open against this guy, my ex-colleagues were actually calling me up, asking me why did I speak up, and look at all the trouble that I've brought upon them because of this investigation. And instead of addressing the issue that happened or taking charge and helping the child, the question that was often asked was, why did you report, and how can we protect the guy, because he's a good guy, he's a great coach, all those stuff. Even if there's no actual claims to those things, they were more concerned about protecting him than the child that went through those horrific experiences. So that has been consistent in terms of my experience over the last 7 years. So that's why I'm trying to do something about it.
Sarina?
I'm a former national rhythmic gymnast. I retired from the sport in 2002 after Asian Games, and I got into coaching right after, and I still coach. So I've been in the sports industry for almost 30 years as an athlete, a coach, administrator, and now an advocate. Being a victim of sexual harassment when I was in sports, and not just sexual harassment, because people tend to think that abuse in sports is mainly sexual harassment and it only happens to girls. But I just want to say that abuse in sports, there are many forms. And I mean, I will share a few experiences of myself being a gymnast. And also a story that happened to a friend of mine, a male swimmer. So I just want to say that, you know, it happens to both boys and girls, and it's still happening. And in 2019, I started advocating for safe sport, and it basically is mainly for three reforms. One is to have a safe sport legislation, which is a specific sports legislation, and the Safe Sport Code, which was finally launched last year in March, and a Safe Sport Center. It's essentially an independent center that, you know, records and investigates allegations of abuse in sports. So that's what I currently do. I advocate, and we're still fighting for the Safe Sport Act to be enacted.
Thank you. Did you experience the, like, you know, we saw in the movie, and based on what you were saying, these are some of the challenges that when we think about responsibility, right? When we think about what is our role within this field to protect our children, you have advocates like yourself, or people who are just outraged, right? People who have a stake in the sports and are involved in the sport somehow, as coaches, as trainers, as whatnot, right? Even as a parent, right? Who then come up and say something and get pushback. We saw this in the movie. We've seen it here. Have you, as an athlete who's experienced sexual harassment, do you think there are any pressures that athletes themselves feel in terms of, like, which prevents them from speaking up, or what makes it so difficult, particularly for young athletes, I think, involved in a sports, that makes it so challenging for them to speak up?
So rhythmic gymnastics, you start as early as 3 years old. I started at 11, and I was in the national team at 12 plus. And you're so young, you don't understand what constitutes abuse or harassment. And you just go with the flow. So when adults say, you know, when your coaches or your administrators, your team managers say that, okay, this is what you're supposed to do, you just do it, because you think that, okay, these adults are here, and whatever they're saying and asking you to do, it is, you know, for your own good. So there was not much, you know, awareness or education about, you know, what abuse is like, and what you can do about it. So as a gymnast, so this is not sexual harassment. So we are forced to, you know, look after our diet, and that basically means not eating at all. And we were forced to, you know, measure our weight every day, at least 9 to 10 times. So it would be before, during, and after, and we would train, you know, 2 or 3 times a day. And I was studying in a boarding school, Bukit Jalil Sports School, and so you're away from your parents 6 days a week. So on Saturday afternoons, you know, when you finish training and you go back home, and you know, you eat a home cooked meal, and then on Sunday when you go back, late evenings, you know, you're bound to, like, gain a couple of, you know, grams. I'm not talking about kilos, grams. So, you know, on Monday when you go for training, and if you gain 200 grams, you would have to wear this. We used to wear this hot suit, and you'll be forced to run outside at the track and field until you lose that 200 grams that you have gained, and then you're allowed into the gym. And that still continues to happen. And, you know, it doesn't matter which day of the time, whether it's morning, you know, in the afternoon when it's really hot, but, you know, you will need to lose that weight. And your weight, you know, is recorded on an Excel sheet for everyone to see. So your coaches would actually, you know, shame you in a way and say, oh, Sarina, you're fat. And you're thinking like, okay, at 40 kilos, I mean, how am I fat? Okay, so so coaches would just, put you on the carpet and say, okay, I think your thighs are big today. And as a child, you're thinking, okay, I am fat. So for most of my career, I struggled with eating disorders. So I would take laxatives. So after I eat, I would, and then, I would go to the toilet and then throw up. And then laxatives just so that, I can lose whatever weight that I can. So, but coaches and including the whole gymnastics community, they don't understand that that is also abuse. So it takes a lot of awareness, and also for the sports association, parents, and to understand that there is a problem. Because most parents think that this is the nature of sport, especially gymnastics. You have to be lean, otherwise you cannot succeed in gymnastics. So it takes the entire community to come together and say that, okay, this is not right. But in order for that to happen, you need that awareness to understand that, okay, this in fact is not right. So in fact, last year, so British gymnastics, so what they did was UK sports, they did this wide review. So for 2.5 years, and the findings are actually published online if you're interested to read about it. It's a 306-page report. But it's fascinating because, this doesn't just happen in British gymnastics, but it happens in, every country in gymnastics. So now they have banned coaches from weighing the gymnasts. So if they're minor athletes, then they would need to get permission from their parents. And if you're above 18, legal age, then you would have to get their consent. And taking, the measurement means can only be done by a medical practitioner, and it has to be on a valid, scientific rationale. Like, okay, why? So now, now that is that safeguarding measure that has been, implemented. So that is great. So now, you can enjoy just doing gymnastics without having to worry about, okay, whether my thighs are big today or am I going to be fat shamed today? So that's great. But for Malaysia, I have to be honest with you, there's still a long way to go.
So it sounds like sports, any particular field in sports, but in some sports more than others, there's an environment and a culture that is collectively built around conformity, around maintaining what is perceived to be an ideal standard, and which makes it, I think in particular, like you said, difficult to speak out, difficult to say, I don't agree with this, right? More so than perhaps in any other setting. Makes it difficult to say, well, this doesn't sit right with me. And even though I might at this point not have the language to articulate why this is wrong, there is something wrong, right? Like I can feel there's something wrong. And I think given how much shame there is around sex and rape, right? I'm assuming that it would be even more harder to like articulate and be able to say, well, this person who I'm supposed to be listening to, who is supposed to tell me what to do, what is right, and how to achieve what I am meant to achieve, is now doing this to me, right? Because and at that age too, right? At 12, well, are you all, like, what do we know at 12? Like, I was thinking about this child, like in the movie too, like she's 10. Right? At what point do you then say, yeah, I totally know what was done to me was wrong at 10, and I know how to talk about it, right? But which takes me, I think, to my next question, and maybe we can move to you. What are the procedures, right? Like what happens in Malaysia when you report something? So say you have a child who then comes forward, a child you're coaching who comes forward, or a parent who a child has told, right? And they take it to you. what happens then? What is the reporting mechanism that's currently in place? So what does that trigger, right? What would happen?
I think for my experience in football, there's usually no reporting mechanism. You tell your coach, and then it's up to your coach to decide where to go and who to report to. And then it becomes the responsibility of that person to decide if they want to lodge a police report or how to proceed forward from there. In the past, there was a kid that was being abused by the dad. And then when we took it to the head of the club, we were told that it's not the club's problem to deal with things like this, and we should just let the school deal with it. But the school has also received reports and have done nothing about it. So there's actually currently no grassroots reporting mechanism. I think some people have tried to reach out to ministries and find a way to report, but in the Malaysian society, it's not something that's talked about. There's no culture in talking about things like this. And when the parents want to reach out for help, they're often shamed by other parents, the people that are around their community shame them and pressure them to not make the report. So a lot of the cases that I've seen, parents just remove the kid from the environment, and the kid then is deprived from playing sports, and that's the end of it.
Typically, a reporting mechanism is almost institutionalized within an organization through a policy, right? That's the standard of how we know what to do when a child or when we receive a complaint around sexual harassment or abuse or sexual abuse. I know you've been advocating, Sarina, you've been advocating for safe sports policies within organizations. Tell us a little bit more about that. Has there been any uptake? Has it been popularly received or outright rejected? What have been some of the responses from, say, sports associations, right? Because like we just heard, in a lot of cases, and based on my own personal experience as well, a lot of times sports associations themselves don't necessarily see the need for a policy that tells you what to do when you receive a complaint.
So even with the launch of the Say Sport Code, which now makes it mandatory for every, especially National Sports Association, to have their internal reporting mechanism and also to have safeguarding measures. But without a legislation, so without reinforcement, there is no way to compel these associations in putting this all in place. So I was in fact involved in the development of the Say Sport Code, and it was frustrating because in the first place, you don't even have the right people with the right skill set in the room drafting the code. So, all of us were not, unified in a sense where, that when we draft this code, the athletes must be at the center of everything that you do, because sports only happens because of the athletes. But everyone was talking about, the administrators, the association. So everyone was trying to protect themselves. So the system that we have in place is designed not to protect athletes, but in fact to protect the reputation of the sports association. So it's very sad. But so the code now, so if you have a complaint now, you report it to the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Olympic Council of Malaysia, or PDRM, or the National Sports Association. But these problems, they exist in the first place because of this. So it needs to be independent, which many people don't want it to be, because then it's very difficult to control, to contain the problem. So even with the code, people need to realize that, is it working? Is it, is it there, and is it capable of protecting your children? Because imagine writing, reporting, an abuse to a national sports association, your child would then face repercussions, and it could be as small as previously your child was given 6 hours of training, and after you have reported, okay, I'm going to cut down your training hours to 4 hours. With that 2 hours, there's so much that you can do, and now you're left behind compared to your peers. Or it could be, okay, you won't be selected to train overseas. So these are all small little things that athletes face, or even, housing allowances, training and competition opportunities, even your competition attires, shoes, all of this. So there's a lot of, factors that goes into, when an athlete wants to report an abuse. So I would say that the code, there's so much flaws and gaps that we still need to work on.
And one of those, if I understood you correctly, then one of those gaps is obviously in the way that it's been drafted, right? It's with the athlete not at the center, but in fact the institutions, the sports institutions, in one way or the other, that are there to protect them against liability of accusations, or not safeguarding the child, the athlete, the person at the center of the accusation.
Absolutely, because when you're going to draft policies like that, you need to gather information, experiences, real experiences from victim survivors,
right,
in sports, not from administrators or coaches.
And what it really sounds like too, then, like we saw in the film, is that the decision to come out, to break the silence, it feels like the onus then and everything thereafter is put on the child, right? It's put on the child and the family. So the option isn't, here, come out, report, break the silence. We will create an environment that is safe for you to come out and say what you need to say, and then after that be protected. No, it sounds like, what it actually is come out, say something, and then you're on your own and bear the repercussions by yourself, right? Because oftentimes the nature of sexual harassment is such that it's sensitive, right? There's a lot of shame and stigma attached to it. And a lot of times we know that people feel unsure and they're scared. But if the only option to you then is to report and then make it a criminal case, meaning you have to take it to the police and lodge a police report, and after that you're kind of left hanging, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next. Is the police going to investigate? Are they going to take it forward? Are they going to interview people, right? The idea that shame might grow, right? Like, dahlah benda ni malu, right? And then you are now going to talk to everyone about my shame seems a really horrifying prospect. So it seems like, if the environment doesn't encourage you to come out and speak, we're essentially perpetuating or creating an environment where people will not come out and speak, because it's not a friendly environment to do so. It is not a safe environment to do so, right? What was your experience? So I know you essentially, you had colleagues who were fired, you had people who were ostracized. Did the idea of coming up with a reporting mechanism or almost like an internal policy on how to deal with sexual harassment or complaints of abuse come up within, say, any of the football associations that you were in, either here or abroad? Because you did mention you've coached in other countries, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, is there a good practice that you can recall in any of the sports associations or football clubs that you were with, mm-hmm, where you were like, actually, this one was something that I would have liked to introduce in all of the places I was at?
So I started my coaching career in 2012 in the UK. So my first exposure to working in the football industry was 100% over there. And I just had this naiveness. I was only 17 at the time. So I had this idea that everywhere I go, this is the standard operation. Like there is mechanism in place, there are safe spaces, people that you can approach. And then in 2018, when I was here, the first place that I worked for in KL, the owner of the club was constantly sexually harassing me. And I was the only female in the entire club at the time. So I thought, okay, I can actually, talk about this to my colleagues. I can talk to the manager. Something will get done. And then when I actually came forward to say that, everyone turned their back against me. And I was told that this is why women shouldn't be allowed to work in football because they can't handle this. And everyone just blocked me on like WhatsApp, Instagram. I was blocked from everything and just left on my own. So I had the option of either going to the police or just resigning and back down or continue working there when no one's going to talk to me. And I just have to tolerate things like rape jokes and harassment. So I decided to just walk away because I didn't know what else to do. A lot of people around me at the time, including friends, just chose to blame me for it, saying that you chose to work in football knowing this would happen. So that was the first time it was a big shock to me that this is how things are done over here. And after I resigned, I went through like a really dark time, like for 3 years after that. And that was the time that I actually made active like research. I went out to find out how can we do this better. So back in the UK, you're not able to pass any of your coaching license if you can't get through the safeguarding course. And a lot of emphasis is put on the safeguarding aspect. Over here, from everything that I've heard from my friends and colleagues that go through coaching licenses, it's a page that they go, okay, right, we're going to get through this real quick and then go for a break. That's it. It's like an inconvenience that they have to do to tick a box. And then a lot of schools, clubs here do not practice safeguarding at all. I know international schools that I've worked with over here take it extremely seriously. So when you have local coaches going into this kind of environment, they often get caught for malpractices, for taking pictures of children to post on their Instagram, a lot of those things, because we're so used to that being normal. So that's like a stark difference that I see. But at the same time, it doesn't take a lot to make things safer for kids. In the UK, the system works in a very straightforward way. A grassroots club is attached to a council, and they have a safeguarding officer. So all the coaches, all the staff members, you have to do your safeguarding license to be employed. You have to go through a criminal background check. Once everything's clear, you're allowed to work in that environment. But if anything comes up, you have to make official report, and that report also goes to the safeguarding officer of that district or that town or wherever it is. So there's a very clear channel, and parents that are not comfortable or players that are not comfortable with speaking to their club can always approach the safeguarding officer that's completely independent. So every concern that they have is taken very seriously, even if it's coming from a child. So that's the stark difference that I see from here and in the UK.
So the safeguarding officer is not employed by is employed by the council.
Employed by the council, but not by the clubs. So they will have like a lot of football clubs, but he's independent.
Was that something you were thinking of when you talked about the independence of like, say, the mechanism that was compelled, like under the Safe Sports Code?
So the three reforms, the Safe Sport Act, Safe Sport Code, and the Safe Sport Center, is actually modeled after the US. So if you had followed the Larry Nassar, the USA Gymnastics, there's a documentary on Netflix, Athlete A. So in 2017, the US, they enacted the Safe Sport Act. And then in 2020, they enacted the Athletes Empowerment Act. So that builds upon the Safe Sport Act, which now makes it, a really solid legal framework that ensures that any sports organization that deals with minor athletes, you must have safeguarding measures. That's number one. So that means, the Safe Sport Center, which is an independent entity, so there's no political interference as well, and from the National Sports Association. And so their responsibility is to actually, go around to all these associations, and including grassroots, to make sure that they have safeguarding measures. So they will audit. So if they don't fulfill the criteria, then you do not get funding. And in fact, you'd be sanctioned. So, it's having mandatory safeguarding measures, and also mandatory safe sport training. So from everyone, including athletes, minor athletes above 18, parents, administrators, coaches, including volunteers. So anyone that comes in contact with an athlete, you must be safe sport trained. Unless, otherwise, then you will not be able to compete. So they have this like national database, which you could even go online now, and you can see that okay, who are these people that are currently being sanctioned? What are the cases that are being investigated, and on what basis these people are being sanctioned for? So as a parent, if you want to send your child for swimming, you can actually go to this national database, and you can find out okay if your coach has a history of sexual harassment, or any complaints. So you get to know that okay, if this person is safe. But in Malaysia, that doesn't exist. And as an athlete or a coach, so if you're not safe sport trained and you go overseas for a competition, you're not allowed to compete because they'll check in the database and they'll find out. And then there's also mandatory reporting, which is absolutely crucial because here, if you see something or you hear something, but there is no law that compels you to now report it to anyone. So then what goes around just keeps so the cycle of abuse just keeps perpetuating. Right. So for example, the volleyball case. I'm not sure if you followed the case, which was last year in January.
2023, right? Was that the case of the volleyball coach who kind of slapped?
Yes.
I think 2 players, right?
Yes. So that clip was actually captured, and it was on the Facebook page for a while. And then one of these parents, whose child was also participating in the tournament, and she approached me and she said, Sarina, it's surprising that, this was on the Facebook page and it happened, in a public area. And they saw this happening, but no one said anything. Because, I would understand, number one, people don't know that, okay, that was abuse, because most people think that, this is how it should be, especially in sports, because I hear it all the time. Right. And even if you know something is wrong, but okay, what do I do now? It's like, should I step in? But I'm just a spectator, or I'm a parent. But if I do so, then what will happen to my child as an athlete? So there's so many things playing in your head, right? And so I thought, okay, and I shared that story with a friend of mine in the media, and that's how it all came about. So as an advocate, when I shared that story, there was so many backlash. People were like, because so far I'm the only person that in Malaysia that talks about safe sport. So immediately they think of, it must be Sarina. So so in the Safe Sport Act, you have, 4 provisions that the US Safe Sport Act has. Apart from the mandatory training, reporting, and safeguarding measures, is to have whistleblower protection. So it makes it safe for anyone to share a story or say something. So it enables everyone, including the public, to protect children in sports. Because if with the Safe Sport Act, and you saw that happening in a volleyball incident, and now you say, okay, with the Safe Sport Act, now I'm compelled to report it to someone, and I feel safe for doing that. And you protect these athletes from abuse.
Absolutely. And whistleblower protection essentially makes you feel safe, right? For raising something. And also takes it out of the realm of the domestic, right? People often say, oh, domestic abuse is often justified as a private home sphere matter, right? Like we don't, a lot of times when people say, oh, why didn't you report when you heard something? People are like, oh, it's between laki bini or between a family, we don't kacau lah. And the same kind of mentality seems to be projected onto like sports. Sports is almost seen like a family, right? sports team is seen like a family, and if abuse happens, that's between the coaches. Itu macam parent nak disciplinkan anak. It's almost that same kind of mentality that we see applied to sports teams, right? So when someone, I think in that particular case, and I wanted to ask this, right? In that particular case, with the volleyball coach slapping the two players in public, that's so horrible too. I saw the video; it's really terrible. That the outcry that was generated by the public, by the public, was so big. I think that action, the ministry was forced to take action, right? And what I understood was that the coach was at the end of the day fired, right? He was let go, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, but correct me if I'm wrong. But what are some of the consequences? Like when you've brought issues to light, aside, I mean, right now it seems like, especially in your case, like you were the person who felt the sanctions, right? But were there any cases of like successfully raising an issue to light and then something like there was some repercussions at least on part of the person who was committing the abuse, the perpetrator? Either of you can choose to answer. You want to go first? Okay.
Yeah, I think like what Sarina said earlier, we don't have a public record. There's no way of checking. So in the past, when coaches were abusing kids and we report it and they take action by firing the coach, he just goes to another club and works and starts over again. And this has been going on for 10 years. I know of a coach that has slapped a child and he's moved around and worked for multiple clubs.
Slapping children.
Yeah, just that's it. And he said that the excuse was he wanted to discipline the child and the parents brought it forward. So he was fired, but he's been working for like 4 other clubs since that incident had happened. And then the guy that I reported for making sexual remarks to a 12-year-old, he's gone on to have like a major position within the football system, and they just move around. So because we don't have a way to access any public record, there's no tracking, there's nothing, and it's always done in a quiet way, people don't know. Until today, there's parents that would hear about these coaches and think they're really great people until we say, oh, but did you know that this had happened? And they're taken by surprise.
With the volleyball incident, it's interesting, right? I mean, thankfully it was captured on the video. I'm not sure if you actually saw the video without the faces being blurred or...
With the faces being blurred.
So I saw the raw footage. And the first thing that I thought that, my God, that this has happened many times because the faces of the athletes, it was blank. I mean, imagine if someone walked up to you and then they slapped you, you would be shocked, right? And you'd be like, but these athletes, nothing. So this happened in a public space. Imagine what happens behind the scenes. So this has happened many times. And for the other coach, the assistant coach that walks past and then hands out the 100 plus to the athletes, I'm thinking that person should also be punished because you are an enabler. Because yes, the coach, because of the outcry, he was punished, rightfully. So he was a school teacher. Now he's not allowed to coach volleyball, but he's still allowed to teach in schools. Interesting, right? And suspension, for how long? Do you know if it's back into the system? You don't know because there's no national database. So this happens, in the media and the newspapers, and people tell you that, okay, we are taking action. So KBS, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, is one. And then you have MOE, the Ministry of Education, is one because he's a school teacher. But without a specific sports legislation, so one person will say, okay, sports, this is my jurisdiction. This is education, my jurisdiction. So I'll do what I think is right here, and I'll do what I think is right here. But what about, international, safeguarding measures like best practices? By right, he shouldn't be even teaching in schools. And he should be sanctioned, and he should be trained. Because now we have, it's very complex, right? Because you can be a school teacher and be teaching sports. And you don't have to be say sport trained, and you could be trained, by your respective association and not by the national body. and for sports it's different. So there's no a unified training education system.
Centralized.
Yeah, that makes sure that that this is what safe sport is all about. So whether you're a school teacher or you're a sports coach, you know. So that's the thing. So until and unless we have a specific sports legislation that ensures that it can extend jurisdiction to even grassroots, because now most like safeguarding measures that is made mandatory because of the Safe Sport Code, it only happens at the elite level. But at the grassroots level, that's where most 90% of your children participate. There's a lot of cases of abuse that goes, you don't even know that exists.
Absolutely. I am so tempted to ask more questions, but then I just check my clock, or check my watch, and realize that I should probably open it up, share the space with the audience. So, you guys, feel free to think of and ask any questions. Please put your hand up if you do have a question. Please put up your hand. Oh, we have a question from the gentleman at the back.
Hi, my name is Philip.
Hi, Philip.
I used to be in HR management. I'm happily retired now, but I've been involved in sexual harassment at the workplace, protections and all that. And I remember there was a code for the eradication of sexual harassment at the workplace. But now we have a Sexual Harassment Act. Now, I can't say that I know much about the act, to be honest, but I want to know whether there's anything in the SHA that actually provides some protection to athletes. But the other thing is this, I think there's a certain amount of, as mentioned earlier, burden on the victims. I mean, to me, what rubbish. Okay, and then some people will say, just say no. You don't expect a 10 or 12-year-old to just say no. So then that comes to my next point. Prevention is better than cure. Absolutely. So how do we even stop that from happening? No, it sounds like the Safe Sport Act will work. But the other thing is this. I mean, I think in some clinics, or is it a requirement, for example, in gynae, that the gynecologist cannot examine a patient without at least a nurse being present? So what similar protections can there be in an athletic environment where there always has to be a co-coach or whatever you want to call that person, where they are there to safeguard the athletes, that there's going to be someone else there who's going to make sure that the coaches behave themselves, and hopefully the co-coach as well. So to me, prevention is better than cure. You don't want to have all the procedures in place, the so-called SOPs that the bureaucrats will look through and require you to file a rape report in triplicate and all that nonsense. So just like to know what the panel's views are on what I've hopefully not taken too long to say.
Thank you, Philip. I think there are two questions in there. They're very good questions. Thank you so much. One is on the Sexual Harassment Act and what provisions can be used to or can be applied to, and essentially potentially what would be the distinction between a Safe Sports Act and a sexual harassment, and the existing Sexual Harassment Act, right? And then what practices exist currently to safeguard athletes?
So the US, they have plenty of legislations as well. But after the Larry Nassar's case, they realized that it's not sufficient to protect athletes because, athletes, we are not classified as employees. So therefore, we are not afforded the same, protections and even the ability to bargain, even for, for a safe environment or, or allowances that, justifies your effort that you put in. So, and athletes, we know, you have a very short span of time to prove yourself as an athlete. And you only have one sports association and, you have to do whatever it takes. So, yeah, athletes will, are forced to endure all of this. And so after the Larry Nassar's case, then now you have the Safe Sport Act, the code and the center, and it's independent. And I mean, it has been proven to be effective, not 100%, I must say, But like you said, it is a preventive measure. So it makes it harder now. So that everyone needs to be safe sport trained, which none of our laws in Malaysia compels someone that if you are in sports and you're handling a minor athlete to be safe sport trained. I mean, yes, the ministry says you must be, but really? Because in Malaysia, I'm the only person that is certified by the International Olympic Committee as a safeguarding officer. The only person in Malaysia. So we don't have enough people that can help to raise awareness, because not enough people are being educated about the importance of safe sport. Now, for like the Olympic Games, for any multi-sport games, Asian Games, Commonwealth Games, SEA Games, they make it compulsory to have safeguarding measures. But that is at the top level. But in Malaysia, to run any event, there's no such rules. And of course, prevention is much better because, this is your childhood. I mean, imagine if it was your child, right? And so like global best practices is to limit interaction, adult interaction with a minor athlete. So, in many countries, they're very strict. So, for example, if you saw an adult, whether it's a coach, administrator, or with a minor athlete, let's say in front of a gym, and if someone walked past and saw that happening, immediately that person is now compelled to report it to the association. Because, I mean, based on research, all of these cases happen because, when an adult and a child is, alone together. Yeah, and most of our training, it's always in a remote area, and we don't have, those days, we don't have access to, mobile phones. Yeah, it's usually, postcards. So I know parents are not even allowed to go into the training facilities. Like imagine if, if the coach found out that your parent was there, immediately you'd be dropped out of the team. You'd be like, So, and that's exactly what happened in Athlete A. So most of these elite gymnasts, they were training, separately, no contact with their parents. And because, my coaches as well, I was trained by coaches, with really harsh training methods, because they think that this is the right way in order to succeed in sports. And that has been passed down from generation to generation. So you need to be, you need to unlearn and then learn new ways of doing things in sports, instead of, of the old saying that, oh, you must be the child, or you must be really strict, and so prevention, like in Athlete A, including having a chaperone. So what happened in one of the scenes is, so this gymnast, she was in the room with her mom and with Larry Nassar, because he was the team's physician. And so she was lying down on the bed with her legs, and then she had a towel on top to cover. And her mom was just here. And he was talking to to her mom while his finger is inside her. And she didn't know. She thought like, okay, her gut feel says, okay, this is not right. But she dare not say anything because she thought, if my mom is in the room and he's still able to do this, then isn't it all right? Yeah, then it's okay. So only then, then she started talking among friends, and then she said, he did this to me. Did he do the same to you? And then, she said, yeah. And then soon enough, then they said, okay, is this right? So yes, having a chaperone will help, but
They need to be aware as well.
yeah.
I think, and it speaks to the need for collective measures, right? It can't just be one person is trained or one measure is taken. It sounds like environmentally there needs to be awareness, right? But also, like you said, like you mentioned earlier, parents need to also be trained and made aware. Coaches need to be, assistant coaches need to be. It needs to be an entire cultural shift of how we think about sexual harassment or even abuse and treatment of athletes. Did you want to talk about safe practices just now?
Yeah, I think that you asked about safe practices.
Yeah,
I think
safe.
we as individuals, it's quite simple. I think we need to shift away from always thinking what's going to happen to the reputation of the club, the reputation of the coach, the parents, things like that, and stop thinking that what will people say, what will people think, and put the athlete that's going through this first. So by supporting them and asking them what they need and making them feel safe, it allows them to open up and seek the help that they need. And then once you start building that environment, everyone is going to feel safe to consistently do things the way that you want them to do it. Because right now, the biggest problem is that you feel unsafe and you know that your teammates, your coaches, your parents, even your friends will turn against you if you speak out. So I think step one is just changing the mindset of we shouldn't talk about this to let's make it comfortable to talk about things like this.
Absolutely.
May I just add?
yes.
I mean, when we talk about prevention, because I coach, and my girls now, as young as 7 years old, they have smartphones, and sometimes they will reach out to me and say, "Hey, Sarina," they ask me questions, and I said, you're not allowed to reach out to me and I'm not supposed to be communicating with you without your parents present. So communication and also social media platforms, because just the other day, so my little one, who is only 6 years old, she was watching this clip, this sports clip, on video, and it says that, okay, if you are unable to perform this movement, then you should be punched in the face. And then so she shared it with the coaches, and we thought, okay, so let's alert the mom. So parents too, they have a role to play in making sure that, okay, like TikTok as well, and all these social media platforms is for their child, not to be watching. And also the other day, this 5-year-old girl, we went for a competition. So she was from another club, and then she was talking to my girl, also 5, and she said to her, like, "Oh, is your teacher strict? Did she say something like, when you didn't win the goal?" She said, no, she just said, "Try harder." And then that girl said, interestingly enough, that, "Oh, that means your coach is not good enough because she didn't, she's not strict." So you see, even at 5 years old, but how are they being conditioned? I mean, they're just 5. So it's adults around them that says that, okay, your coach needs to be strict, needs to be fierce. Then, that coach is a good coach.
Absolutely. And something that Keshika said struck me too, this idea that a club or an association, a sports association, or even like a sports-related institute doesn't want to lose face, doesn't want to look bad by exposing coaches under them. It strikes me as really ironic that is the measure of what would make them look bad, as opposed to taking action against someone in their organization who is exploiting, abusing, or harming children. Like to be seen, to take action, wouldn't that do more for you and your reputation than covering up something like that and pretending it didn't happen, right? It's interesting to me what collectively institutions or organizations then use as a benchmark for, we have to just protect our reputation, right? So that was just like an I mean, it clearly also happens in Greece with the sailing association. Happens here too. This is not something that's unique to us, but it's an interesting observation of what is considered, this is something we cannot talk about because it'll bring shame to us, as opposed to, no, if we bring this person, if we expose this person and prevent him from harming children, wouldn't the public think better of us for protecting children under our care? Anyway, okay, anyone else? Does anyone else have questions? I see one hand up. I want to try and see if I can collect questions. Do we have anyone else who wants to ask questions?
Hi, thank you for hosting this, and thank you to Freedom Film Fest for this. I guess one question I have, I was born and raised here, lived in the UK, so I understand where you're coming from with regards to safeguarding. I went to international school here. I see a lot of sentiment and rhetoric here regarding the idea of like the Western influence is being too sensitive. You're overprotecting a child. And I guess my question would be regarding your exposure and your observations working with the communities here. What is that gap between us overcoming this space of, like, as you were just explaining, being too strict with the kids and being, or you're not being strict enough, and having a ballet experience? I have a similar experience with my ballet teacher, who is an excellent teacher. And then I was very blessed because I'd heard about the ballet teachers with the rotan and like hitting their kids and throwing shoes at them. And my teacher was nothing like that. So how do we overcome in our community and our society here from feeling like, oh, the Western influence is being too sensitive, you're just making a drama out of something that is not needed to be made into something this serious, I guess.
Hi, my name is Malik. I actually have the same, more or less the same question, something along the same lines. Very quickly, I recently started a football club for kids, and the main reason was because of safety as well. And that's our main drive. But the main problem we find is that parents don't understand what is safe. They think, like you said, if your coach doesn't shout at you, that means he's not a good coach. I don't really agree with that. So, yeah, how do we get that message across? Because I think that if we start with the parents, and then maybe every other club would follow suit, because business-wise demand would fall, etc. So, yeah. Thank you.
And thank you so much. And that third question?
Hi, my name is Karina. I'm actually a volunteer. My question is actually for Sarina. You touched upon your experience with an eating disorder due to constant pressure of monitoring of your weight. My question is actually, what steps are taken to help athletes when they are identified to have eating disorders? Does it go as far as just helping them recover physically, or do they also help the athletes recover mentally? Because you can imagine going through an eating disorder, you go in this mental state where every bite of food makes you paranoid. You'll think, will this tip the scale, and how long will this take me to lose the weight of what I just had? So yeah, that's my question.
So just to recap, question number 1 and 2, essentially around how do we overcome the strict enough conundrum. Okay, I'm just going to summarize it as that, the strict enough conundrum, and kind of get parents, community, people on board, right? That's not necessarily something we want to encourage. And how do you align that with safeguarding, correct? Safeguarding and child protection. And then the second question was, I think that, the third question was directed at you around eating disorders. Did you want to speak on maybe both of you can give your takes on the strict enough conundrum. Keshika?
I think we often have this idea in like Asian society that if your coach or a teacher is strict, then they're doing something right. But I think we need to start shifting the discussion towards the damage that being strict does to a kid's psyche, especially because we have coaches that would yell at kids. So the last team that I coached was a senior men's team, but they started from 18 and above. So a lot of the kids would come to me when they were 16, and from there, my job was to get them to be fit enough to compete in the men's league and then get professional contracts. But the biggest concern, the biggest reason they underperform is often the abuse that they gotten from coaches that were strict. Because it's such a male-dominated field, it's always said that the coaches that shout the loudest and is the most strict coach is the best coach. But these kids, when they get to the point where they were 14, 15, 16, they're so damaged, like emotionally and psychologically damaged, that they cannot perform. We had an athlete, this player, he was decent, but every time he had the ball in front of the goal, he deliberately misses the goal, even if it's open goal. So one day we asked him, like, what's going on? Why is this something that you can't do? Because in terms of a technical skill, you can execute. And then he opened up and he shared that for the past 5 years, the coach that he had would just shout at him. Every time he gets the ball right in front of the goal, the guy would be shouting and shouting, "Don't miss, you better not miss," things like that. So it's essentially abuse. And it got to a point where this kid could have made it, but until today, he never overcame that psychological barrier of not being able to perform because he, according to him, said that he hears his coach's voice in his head shouting at him, and he just doesn't want to proceed to try to score or do anything beyond that. So a lot of the work was unlearning and undoing the damage, that came from strict coaches. So I think the conversation should shift to say, right, it's better to be more sensitive, to be softer, and have kids that even if they don't make it as professional athletes, they're going to be healthier individual emotionally and mentally than abusing them to a point where they succeed for a short amount of time, because as athletes the career is not 50 years long. So they will succeed, they achieve everything, but the rest of their life is just down the drain. So I think we shift the conversation to know which is the more important thing for the human that's in front of you, rather than being a strict coach or a teacher and then abusing them.
And the other thing I noticed was just also the language that we use, right? Strict. Does strict necessarily equate to abuse? Can we, if they're actually abusing the children, can we use that language? These are abusive coaches versus strict coaches. Does strict necessarily have to be, does strict necessarily have to equate to abuse? Or can we redefine strict to mean sensitive to the children's needs, to what their developmental needs are as athletes, as in their growth, etc., right? Because people are like, oh, strict is good, but strict doesn't have to mean abusive, or name it what it is, right? This is abuse. This is beyond strict already, right? This is not how children are supposed to be. Would you, in cases like, say, the football, when you're setting up a football club like that, would you recommend like doing a session with parents, calling parents in? Does that work? It's a direct hint for you, live. It's something you're considering, right?
I remember when I was training in the national team, and I came back one day and I said, "Dad, my coach is really strict." And my dad said, "Yeah, that means, she's a good coach." So that stuck with me for a very long time. Now I coach, it's been 20 years, and my youngest is 3 years old, and it's really tough. It's really tough to discipline them, especially at such a young age. And it's a big group, and they're all running around, and there's this constant pressure to deliver medals, even at 5 years old. Because I have parents who are comparing results, medals, colors, and among kids at 5, 6 years old with other clubs. And for me, it has never been about the medals, because I think we often make that mistake that we always use elite sports as a benchmark. But we have to understand that elite sports is entertainment. When you compete at the Olympic, when you watch it on TV, it's a whole different ballgame. You're talking about sponsorship, endorsement. It's a different level compared to youth sports. So what I'm coaching is youth sports. It's meant to be fun. It's meant for kids to enjoy, to be active, to participate, and just be free, And it's not about medals. It's great. When you work hard, when you love something so much, you will eventually work hard, and the results will come eventually. But it takes, the whole community, including the coaches and the parents, to understand that, yes, being strict, you're absolutely right. I am a strict coach. Like all my, my students, as soon as they see me inside the hall, compared to the other, they'll stand, a little bit more straighter. But that doesn't mean, you should condone like abusive language. I was just at a competition a couple of weeks ago, and parents are not allowed to be inside, because of limited spaces, which I think is also not right. And there was this particular coach, and as soon as a gymnast walks out of the carpet, and you could hear her yell, "You're so stupid," I heard the word stupid at least 20 times. And I'm thinking that poor child she's eventually going to, believe that she's stupid. But because the whole community, we were all brought up by the same, style of treatment, that we think that should be the way. So even with the safe spot code, without enforcement, even myself, what am I going to do? I mean, yes, I could walk up to her and I say, Miss, you shouldn't be using this kind of language on your child. But then what happens, behind the scenes, we don't know. So yeah.
Did you also want to speak to that last question on what steps are taken for athletes when it's found, for example, that they have eating disorders or something like that?
But before I touch on that, I mean, it's great that to have discussions with parents about safeguarding measures, because ever since I started advocating for safe sport, so I talked to my girls. And COVID was great because, for 18 months we did training online. It was challenging, but it was great because we shifted our pedagogy. And what we did was, before the physical training started, we had discussions okay, because as a gymnast, we were thought okay, you cannot eat. I'm thinking, and I would, often have parents calling in, to inquire if, it's like, my daughter is really interested in gymnastics, but I'm just so afraid because they say that you can't eat. And I'm like, okay, that is wrong because it's all about, eating a healthy diet. But what is a healthy diet? Because my coaches would say, oh, you can't eat sweets, you can't eat chocolate, you can't eat carbs, you can't eat so many things. And eventually, you just don't eat anything. Or, you hide food and stuff. So it's about, teaching them the science behind it. Okay, why is sugar really bad for you? What does it do, to your brain? And how does it eventually affect, your performance as an athlete? So if you teach them the science behind it, then you're educating them. And then they're beginning to, they'll make better choices. Yeah, so then it depends on them already. Is their autonomy okay, do I... if I want to be a better athlete, okay, now with the information that I have about, certain, because, for example, Milo is actually bad for you as an athlete because it's pure sugar. But because it's marketed in such a way, and you have Milo, Milo trucks at sports events, you tend to believe that Milo is good for you. What's the
Oh my
tagline
God,
for
I didn't know Milo was bad for me all this time. I bought into it.
No, but what's the tagline for Milo?
Milo anda jadi sehat dan kuat. Yes.
Exactly.
It's been drummed into me.
Yes. So that's what I had to train my girls and their parents to say, okay, parents, please, I'm not saying don't drink Milo, otherwise I'll be sued for this. But, please do some research on it, and then make better choices.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I know we're out of time. It feels like this room has been spared. For the side of the room has been spared from being called upon. Okay, unless, okay, if anybody has burning questions, if you kind of waggle your finger and let me know, I might consider it, Che, because I have power as moderator to call, to shift the margins a little bit. But otherwise, if nobody's waggling their fingers.
I've not answered that question.
Oh yeah, the eating disorder. Yes, thank you.
It was very tough because as an athlete, we don't get any support, in terms of that. So you're practically on your own. In fact, the coaches don't even know that, we do this. Like all of us, we take laxatives, we go to the toilet, and we try to throw,
How old were you at that point?
So I started at 11 plus, and then until I retired in 2002.
How did you get a hold of laxatives at 11?
Actually, you could get it from... okay, I'd rather not.
No. I mean, it's okay. I mean, where do 11-year-olds...
No, we could actually ask for it.
Ah, okay. Well, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
so,
Okay.
So... But overseas, abroad, that every sports association, you are held accountable. because you are forced to, take laxatives, and now you're suffering from that. You are supposed to educate and also, provide treatment and help. That means professional counseling and to the athletes. So it's mentoring. But here in Malaysia, there's no such thing. So that is the gap.
The onus too, then, it shifts it completely, right? One is the an 11-year-old obtaining laxatives is one thing, right? But like to find out that you can actually request it means there is an implicit, like there is the institution condones it, right? To a certain extent, and we don't know whether that practice has continued. So we'll just safeguard ourselves here for a second, right? But it shifts the power balance. Like it immediately, like if an organizer, if a coach, for example, or an institution or something actually says, or sends the message that you can actually ask for laxatives, that means you're already sending out the message that we know this will help you lose weight, cut weight, etc. Then there's less likely to be support then for the recovery from, or even to view it as a problem enough to say, okay, well, if you do this, then here's some support to help you recover from it, because it's not viewed as a problem, right? So the impetus is slightly like the onus to fix the problem isn't really on the institution itself, right? Hence lack of support. So to shift it to view child safeguarding holistically, I think it really seems to be the key thing that we can take away from this discussion. Okay, I know we're at time, in fact, slightly over. Last words before we close the panel. Last words on the issue of child safeguarding, or anything you want to say on the issue. Parting words.
I think so often, like, we tend to want, like, government bodies and associations to take actions to do things. But I think as individuals, whether you're a parent, coach, bystander, someone that happened to know kids, you can do a lot more than you think. Having conversations can shift a lot of things. You don't have to wait for legislation. You don't have to wait for bodies to take action. Individually, if we all open up conversations and just have practices where we normalize talking about safety and protecting kids, then that would just seep through much quicker, and you change things culturally. So rather than always depending on a big shift, we can do small things to change things. So that's my hope for everyone that's here today.
Adding to that is, number one, I think, all of us, we have, a role to play, to be a positive bystander, not, just wait for the government to do something, to implement this policy, or, having one safeguarding officer is not enough. Everyone needs to be, aware and educated, and that there are plenty of resources online that I'll recommend that, if you're interested in safeguarding measures, is to go on the US Safe Sport Center. They have plenty, very comprehensive, including toolkit for parents, to even identify and how to communicate with their kids. Small little signs like how to identify whether your child is being abused in sports or not, and how do you even speak to them, and start a conversation. So there are plenty of these resources online. So it's all, up to us to make that small little change and shift.
Absolutely. And you're both advocates on the issue. Can people get in touch with you to speak, if they, like for speaking engagements, or to talk to parents, or tips, advice, etc.? Can people get in touch with you if they want to know what to do in order to create a safer environment, sports environment for their children?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to get in touch is Keshika Subbarao Instagram. I'm sure that we can get in touch through the Instagram from FreedomFilmFest, or get in touch with them and they will put you through.
So one of my way of advocating is, so for every cases of abuse that happens in sports, so I'll write, so there's plenty of research that's done for every post that I published on LinkedIn. So
Under your name or Safe Sports?
under my name and under Safe Sport. Yeah, I'm afraid we don't have enough funding for a website. But yes, but my personal social media on LinkedIn is comprehensive. So for every case, I write about it, and I try to inform and educate the public about what's safeguarding, and how can we help to prevent this from happening. Just for each specific cases, if you're interested.
Excellent. And with that, thank you so much to my speakers, Sarina and Keshika. Thank you so much. Thank you for being an engaged audience. We really appreciate it. And thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon with us. Bye, everybody.